Get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the most amazing homesteading channel on the internet that has absolutely nothing to do with homesteading. Trying to get into your view without blocking it. We've had some really odd things going on around here at night lately. Actually, the first one was just before dark. A couple days ago, I was up here in one part of the property. I'm going to show you this big limb. See that big tree? And then there's that big limb that fell this summer. That's a big giant old growth oak. I was up here actually looking at that, considering the best way to cut it up for firewood, when I heard something else falling out of another tree about 100 yards down the hill, just crashing through the limbs, through the branches, and then I heard it thump on the ground, and I thought, well, that must be another big limb. Sounded big enough to, be some firewood. And so I walked down there, and no limb had fallen. And on my way down, there were no trees swaying. There was no breeze, no wind. A tree had not fallen, nor had a limb. It was as if something huge had jumped out of a tree close to the top and landed on the ground. Now, just last night, maybe a bear got into our trash can and carried it. This is one of those big black commercial bins that you'd put down by the side of the road once a week. Rolled it and carried it. Didn't knock it over and knock the top off like a bear, but took it away from the back porch about 20 yards out into the field so that it would have total darkness, and then rummaged through it. I've never seen anything like it. And there was no bear scat, no raccoon scat. And of course, raccoons couldn't do that. And it was full. And we had some leftovers we brought home from a restaurant in the black, takeout type containers with the lid shut. These had been opened. They had not been ripped open or torn apart with teeth or claws. They had been opened as if with hands. And we had thrown the leftovers away because they had been in the ref for a few days. We knew we weren't going to eat them, so we just threw them out to make space. So there's some weird stuff going on here. So that's why I'm trying not to block your view. Get my 6. It's military terminology for watch behind me, because you never know who or what may or may not show up in the backdrop of these videos. So with that kind of creepy story now told, we're going to get into another creepy story. And I'm not saying it's potentially a Bigfoot Sasquatch, this thing, but it could be a mountain lion. It could be mountain lions couldn't just pick up a trash bin. I don't know. I have no idea. But I do know that there has been multiple sightings around here of mountain lions, even though they're not supposed to be in this area. We believe we picked one up on video about a year and a half or so ago. People saw it, and I went back and looked at it, and it sure was a giant cat jumping off of like a stump or something. All right, now get my old man reading glasses on. Tonight's October night's reading is going to come from True Hauntings, Volume 4. Look at that crazy guy in the picture. These are available in print and Kindle on Amazon, as well as the rest of my books. So, but if you can't afford them or you just don't want to spend any money on them, just come to the channel and listen to the stories here as I read them aloud. Today, this evening, this October night, we're going to be reading a story submitted from I don't know. Let me read it. It's not from me. It's from either a viewer or a reader. It's called Grandpa's Ghost, okay? Hello, Mr. Lake. I read your first volume of True Hauntings, and I wanted to submit a story for your consideration of future publication. Well, here it is. You have my permission to share it. I only ask that you keep me anonymous, as I don't want to bring any ridicule to my family. Excuse me. There's nothing shameful about my story. I've just found out through experience that once you start talking about things that aren't supposed to exist, be it cryptids like Bigfoot and Nessie, or paranormal beings like ghosts and haints, people will judge you. Yeah, you're not kidding. They'll write you off as nuts and never take anything you say after that seriously. Well, if they would just experience some of the stuff that those of us who have seen these things have, they would certainly change their tunes. I live in eastern Tennessee, and as you might imagine, I grew up an outdoorsman. From the time I could walk, I was fishing, hunting, and camping. It's a way of life for people where I come from. One thing I remember from when I was really young was that when me and my dad would be out fishing or hunting and the wind picked up, my dad would look around and get all nervous. If the wind persisted, we would round up our stuff and head for the truck as fast as we could and get the hell out of Dodge. It wasn't until I was about 12 that I found out why my dad acted that way. It turns out that when his dad was a middle-aged man, he'd been killed by a tree during a windstorm while he'd been hunting out in the woods. A widowmaker is what they call the trees. They're either dead or dying and have already fallen and been caught by other trees. All it takes is a big strong wind gust to bring them the rest of the way down, and if you happen to be standing or walking under them, then your wife becomes a widow. It's kind of ironic. I just pointed out that huge limb. Let me tell you, if that limb right there, that limb's bigger than most trees. If that thing landed on somebody, it would kill you. So, yeah, I'm good. All right, back to the story. My mother is actually the one who told me about what had happened to my paternal grandfather. And if you're shocked that I didn't know these facts until I was 12, don't be. In Appalachia, people don't talk too much about their family's history. It's like they're ashamed of it for some reason. I'll never understand why. I grew up in Appalachia. I can relate to that. It's an accurate statement. Mom told me, though, that the main reason Dad never liked to talk about it is because his father's death would later lead to some urban legends. Men would talk about having been out hunting or fishing during windstorms and see a misty man out in the woods. Misty is in a ghost-like apparition, and claim that he looked like my father's father. Now, these stories go way back. I'm in my 30s now, and no one my age or younger, or even up to 40 or 50 years older, I would imagine, would even know what my grandfather looked like. Anyway, the story goes that the ghost of my grandfather is always seen leaning up against an old dead tree with his arms crossed, like he's waiting on somebody. Well, when people have noticed him, so the stories go, it's always been all of a sudden. It's like they're walking through the woods, minding their own business, and all of a sudden he's there, when just a second ago he wasn't. But what makes the story even more creepy is that when the people who see him, they come to a complete stop, as if they're panicked or startled. And the tree that my grandfather is leaning up against gives way and falls in the wind. More than one person has claimed to have had this experience, and they've claimed that if they hadn't seen Granddaddy's ghost when they did, that they'd have been right in the path of that falling tree and been crushed flat like a pancake. Wow. I could understand why my father didn't like these stories. He was a teenager when his dad died, and I know that had to be hard on him. I can only imagine that having his memories slandered by being at the center of a ghost story would just make things worse. You get my 6? However, and as much as I respect my father, I have to lean towards saying that these stories are not urban legends, but the truth. I know because just last fall I saw my granddaddy's ghost. I was back home last fall turkey hunting. I'd gone up to one of my lifelong favorite spots only to be let down when I saw that within the last year, the whole mountaintop had been logged and clear cut. I was doing the best I could, making my way through a clear cut, trying not to get caught up in the brambles and whatnot, when all of a sudden I look up and I see what looks like a man leaning up against a tree with his arms crossed. At first I thought it was an actual person, but when I took a closer look, I realized it couldn't be, for you see, it was a bright and clear day, and I could look straight through him and see the tree that he was leaning up against. It was as if he were a cloud of fog in human form in front of that tree. I squinted my eyes and looked as hard as I could. I squinted my eyes and looked as hard as I could, and I realized this misty man looked like my father. "Granddaddy," I said, and he smiled. And as he did, the very tree he'd been leaning against fell, and it fell my way. It had been cut toward the bottom during the clear-cutting operation, but not all the way through, so it was just kind of standing there, waiting for the right wind to come from the right angle and finish the job. The lumberjack didn't. I was so in awe of what was going on that even though the tree was falling my way, I didn't move. It hit the ground so hard that the ground shook, and it was only then that I realized it had a massive fork, and I was standing right in the middle of the fork, only about 10 feet away from the main trunk. If I had been 3 feet further to the left or the right, I would have been killed by either fork. If I had walked another 10 feet ahead before stopping, I would have been killed by the trunk. Just like the old, not-so-urban legend stated, the ghost of my grandfather appeared just as at the perfect timing to get me to come to a stop and keep from getting killed. I know this story sounds far-fetched, but it's only because other people who've contributed stories to your True Hauntings collections have come forward that I've finally felt the courage to come forward with mine. Again, you have my full permission to use this story, but just please keep my name out of it, anonymous. So there you have it, folks. Another wonderful story for October nights from True Hauntings Volume 4. If you have a story, if you've experienced anything out of the ordinary, paranormal related, supernatural, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, send it to the channel. The email address is crazylake@mail.com. Give us your permission to use it, and we will. We'll tell the story on the videos, put it in an upcoming publication of True Hauntings. Volume 5 is already collecting stories from viewers like you and readers from Amazon. So again, send your story to crazylake@mail.com, and we'll share it with the people. And we will see you more next time.